All right. I was just remembering one time when we apparently had processed one of the teaching labs as a crime scene, and whoever processed it did a great job. They pretty much black powdered every surface known to humankind. And then they forgot to clean it. So you put your book down and then it's there, you touch your face, and all of a sudden there you are on Mary Poppins like a chimney sweep. So that black powder gets everywhere. And I guess we're having a little bit of a discussion about whether black powder or glitter would be worse to get everywhere. And I'm going to have to say black powder because
Powder.
when we did it, it got everywhere and it was really hard to clean off. But perhaps the others, want to counter me, and then we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, glitter, you can at least tape lift or you can vacuum it up. Black powder, you can't do that. I mean, you have to, it was awful. It was just awful. I remember that it was in one of the bathrooms too. And one of the bathrooms had this tile wall with white grout. And I don't know why the students, well, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, black powder, worse, definitely.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I was I was a victim of the black powder massacre, the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would really caution people if they're going to use black powder. It really is very difficult to get off of things, and it gets everywhere. And I had a big smudge, and yeah, it was. I'm sure my students were laughing at me. All right, so it's time for question and answer. We have lots of people asking, lots of people saying it was great videos, and then we had someone asking if maybe later on could be also opportunity to meet. Absolutely, I think our contact information is on the website, so we're happy to keep in contact. So questions about these forensic science videos or anything else?
Oh, yeah, thank you. The techniques were really fun to do. I wanted to do this to give folks who haven't done um, any forensic science stuff kind of an idea, really, of kind of how straightforward it is. So while we're waiting for questions, if you have questions or have comments, that's great. But that was kind of the idea. Oh, hi. Yeah. Hi, Dr. Sweat.
Kim, could you describe for everyone some examples of student questions and student projects that you had in your forensics class, and some of the diversity of ideas the students came up with?
Yes, I had. Now this was a great class. Like I said, it was the first summer cure, so it was 8 weeks long. So students knew they had to come to school in Arizona in the summer. Now these were all local students, but going out of your house in the summer in Arizona is a challenge enough. And I had students who voluntarily set up 2 experiments outside that they had to check daily. So let's see, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. Some groups had one person in it. And I am reminded that there was a hair question, and I didn't quite see what the question was. So I can go through the questions my students had, and then I can address the kind of the trace evidence hair question. One student wanted to know about persistence of latent prints, development of latent prints on hair. Identification of hair samples from the crime scene. Okay, let me. Obviously, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. trace evidence here. So I'll address this one here. Trace evidence is a really good example of something you can do for a cure. It's less equipment intensive, and really there's a lot of different hairs that even just a compound light microscope you'd be able to look at. You don't need something fancy like an SEM, scanning electron microscope. Even something like a stereo zoom microscope would work too. So yeah, I could definitely see where the identification of hairs or different types of hairs, different types of trace evidence that have been collected from a scene, or the persistence of such trace evidence collected from a scene or a particular scene over time. You know that you've planted a certain amount of hairs, and how long do they stay over time? That's a great idea. That's a great question. Now, with forensic science, hair has a little bit of a different history, and mostly, hair comparisons aren't really done now, but for a good research project to get them started on a question, I think that's a great one to have. Another example of a question one of my students had was the persistence of saliva on bodies. So this is where I found out, okay, students want to do some experiments on dead bodies. Why? Well, believe it or not, there is actually latent evidence left on victims who have been, of course, left if they're dumped in the desert or, left at a crime scene over time. So a group of students wanted to know saliva can be present in bite marks and in other types of situations on a body. So that's where I had to get the rats or the mice to determine how long this saliva could be detected on these bodies that were left outside in the Arizona heat for a certain amount of time. And one of our nuisance variables that we didn't take into account, even though they had a cage, they built a great cage out of chicken wire, they hammered it down. We have some really smart coyotes or really smart feral cats around here, and they got in. And they had to deal with it. Another question dealt with the persistence of bloodstain patterns in the heat. And then, another student group did the persistence of blood after it's been cleaned and painted over. Again, trying to mimic, okay, well, what would someone at a crime scene do? Okay, well, blood gets on the wall. Okay, well, I'm going to clean it up on the wall. But I'm going to paint over it too, because you may not have seen it very well in the videos, but the luminol or the blue star would be able to detect the cleaning. And they did some really good experiments on different cleaning materials and different types of paints, and how those could or couldn't be detected with blue star. And two of those papers or abstracts were actually accepted for poster presentations at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, which is the international forensic science professional organization. And so they were able to go to that conference and present. And I was very, very proud of them for that. So again, as undergraduate students, they attended a professional organization, met a lot of different people, and they have published proceedings. So I could just talk about that forever. Let's see if there's any other questions here.
Didn't you have a couple of other projects? Didn't you have a fingerprint project?
I did, and the fingerprint project, unfortunately, that was one of those situations where it was kind of an example of maybe what not to do for the future. The student really wanted to do this. he really, really, really wanted to do this. And even the slightly being persuasive of, hey, you know, why don't you try doing this? Why don't you try doing that? And after the first bits of information or non-information, if you will, came in, wasn't very successful. But I told him, these are still results. You are still getting results. And so this is something that you are still going to present. So while it wasn't a successful experiment per se, I still think it was successful in that it showed you how to improve for the future and what could have made the question, I guess, better to look at. And he understood, you know, he got it after a bit. So that made me happy.
So we did have another question in the chat about how much experience do you think some of these projects would need? So could we do a project like this without too much experience?
Yes, and I wholeheartedly say yes, because two out of the 8 or so students that I had were biology majors. Or biology and one environmental science. They had no interest in forensic science whatsoever, or they did, but they didn't have any previous experience in it. And then the students that I had were kind of in the middle of their forensic science degree. So they hadn't gone off into these 400, 500 level classes. They had still taken a couple 200, 300 level classes. So you don't necessarily have to have years and years of experience or even 3 years of schooling to do this. The one thing I would say is when you are developing something like this, look at what's been done. These I have to say the forensic science papers are really good about spelling out methods, materials. But then also the biggest thing with forensic science is not necessarily materials and methods, but also the thought process that you have to be able to support this in court later on. So that's something else to get the students to think about, that documentation, being transparent in what's going on, that's also part of forensic science, which can also be part of your forensic science ICURE. So yes, there's a lot of companies, and I believe Jennifer Hackney Price put on the website the list of companies that have different kits, different sets that you can purchase, whether you're involved in crime scene forensic science or not. As educators, you're able to purchase these materials. And they come with instructions, they come with protocols. And if you're ever at a loss for where do I find a protocol, you can always contact me, really. I hope that answered the question.
I tried to roll some fingerprints.
Rolling fingerprints are so hard. It's almost better if you roll your own, because you're trying to control someone else's finger. And what do you want to do when someone has a hold of your hand? You're pulling away. So it's almost easier just to do it yourself, or just hit it, just do your own print. Rolling prints is a nightmare, and it's a nightmare even for fingerprint technicians to do it. So that makes anybody feel any better. It's kind of a challenge.
I was trying to roll prints with some elementary students. We were doing a little bit of, forensic science, activities, which were more of the, which was more of the inquiry. And I put into the chat an inquiry book that I really like that is for K through 12. Remember, I shared those books with you? And they have a lot of forensic science for kids and so forth. And they're more inquiry, but they have some pretty simple ideas that then you could, expand on much more.
Yeah, there are some really good books out there. When I first started at ASU, and let me mention this really quick. I mentioned that there were some websites up on the website, some vendors up on the website. I didn't get those in time, so those can be sent out to everybody who's interested. They're just a list of links for vendors and for different ideas of where you can go for these forensic science specific products. And as Pam was saying, the books that she gave me and then prompted me to search out, there are some really good books out there. Even the ones, it's homeschooling science experiments. And it's great because they have a list of all these different supplies, where you can get them, very inexpensive. So when we're talking being on a teacher's budget, this book, I'll do a little bit of research on what the name is, and then I'll be able to put that up in the chat for everybody, because it's a really good book. And these are good experiments they seem pretty simplistic, but they can be expanded upon.
Great. Yeah, I found that when I was doing certain things with outreach with some elementary school students, some of the things were simple, but you needed practice, how to roll a fingerprint, how to look at a fingerprint, what is a ridge and all of that. And so, a little bit more practice.
Yeah.
All right. So we put in the chat links to the website with some of the projects, and then those 2 posters that you were talking about. So the students have presentations and they are in a proceedings. So more questions about forensic science?
Let's see, in the 8th week course, do you ask your students to be in the lab each week? Yeah, they are in the lab each week. For an 8-week summer course, the students have to attend, 2, 4, 6. They have to attend, I think, at least 6 to 8 hours of class a week. So instead of having them be there 1 hour for a lecture and then 5, 6, 7, 8, however many hours for a lab, we kind of the way that I did it was have a little bit of talking in the beginning, have maybe 45 minutes of lecture or so, and then take a break. Nope, no break. Great, come back and let's do lab stuff. And then we dove into the cure, and we used those worksheets that were developed, started talking about hypotheses and experiment development. That was the time when the students would also work on finding their source literature. So they were, like I said, I was very impressed with them. They were there every day, 2.5, 3 hours, 3 days a week in the summer, uphill both ways, So yes, they were in the lab.
Okay, excellent. So we have the link up now in the chat, link for the forensic vendors. And so hopefully that will help you think about this. And don't forget to fill out your survey. If you're a non-ASU participant and you fill out all your surveys, then we have generous support from the National Science Foundation to help you purchase a few supplies for your cure. All right, so more questions?
If there aren't, or if there's any questions that come up at all during break or whenever, like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, excellent. So we are going to break for lunch until 2 o'clock. But before we do that, we want to tell you a little bit about the final videos that we are going to be showing. So we will show a few more videos and then have another question and answer session and then a conclusion. So that will begin at 2 o'clock Arizona time, and Jennifer Broach will talk a little bit about those videos.
Yeah, so the upcoming videos are just a continuation of what you've already seen. So there's a process that the students go through from research question to analysis. So I kind of just go into basic experimental design. I mean, we don't go through everything. And then data visualization activities that you can introduce to your students, all of which are supported by the handouts. And then we have the final one was why stats. So it's kind of an interesting kind of spin on why you would even need to use statistics in their analysis, because not often students really, I think of statistical tests, but they don't always think that they need that to show any results or evidence. So it's just a little bit more about how you can support your students through the data analysis portion. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the time of the video correct. So I'm going to kick it back to Pam for a minute.
Okay, so the time of the video, 2 p.m. for the next videos starting. That's what I have on Run of Show, is that we have the basic experimental design starting at 2 p.m. Arizona time. On the website, it says 1:45. We are going to fix that to 2 p.m. So we will get back here at 2 p.m. All right, and we did want to one more thing. We just got the Citizen Science Bee Monitoring Guide with an identification section and with a web address, and so those will be in the Google the Google folder where everything else is. So we'll be back here at 2 o'clock Arizona time.